By now, I've reviewed plenty of Macs and laptops, but I continue to come back to this. This is the 2024 M3 MacBook Air that I've been using every day for well over a year, almost 2 years now actually. And I still think there's little reason to upgrade, even with the M5 Macs around the corner. Especially when we consider the big macOS 26 Tahoe update. So between software improvements, performance boosts, and a redesigned liquid glass user interface, this M3 Air genuinely feels like a new laptop. And you can actually find one now for under $900 US on Apple's refurbished store. In fact, you can probably find one for $800. And here's why I think then this is not only one of the best value Macs you can currently get, but actually a future-proof Mac that you can comfortably use for many years to come. So if you're thinking of buying a MacBook or even switching entirely to a Mac, I hope this honest long-term review will help you out. For starters, this thing has held up incredibly well. It still looks as new, and that's after being used daily in all sorts of environments without a case and without a screen protector. There's no creaking, no loose hinges, no broken buttons or dead pixels. The entire aluminium MacBook unibody still looks and feels premium. And if you remember, Apple added a new anodization coating onto this midnight color from the M2 to the M3. And I have to say, it's impressed me more today than it did when I first got it because it does such a good job repelling fingerprints. And I never feel like the need to wipe it down. But the keyboard, however, the keyboard is a different story. This is still such a total fingerprint magnet, especially if you have particularly oily hands or if you just ate and you didn't wash your hands. I wish Apple would just develop a coating for the keyboard and not just the body. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of solution out there, but after a proper wipe down, the whole laptop does look and feel new out of the box. So if you're buying a refurbished model, especially if you're going through Apple, you're going to get a MacBook that feels practically as new. But what I appreciate most over the years using it is just how portable it is. The 13-inch variant is only 2.7 pounds or 1.24 kilograms, and it's silly thin. So it's ridiculously easy to carry, yet it doesn't sacrifice all that much on performance, even over a year later. I've used it on planes, in cafes, on bullet trains, or just lounging at home, and it is just a joy to lay on your lap and work from, or slip into any bag and it disappears like a notebook. Seriously, it makes most wallets look overstuffed. It hits that careful sweet spot between portability and power. And that's exactly the reason why I reach for this laptop over almost everything else. That said, I do miss the larger screen sizes. When I switch over to the 14-inch MacBook Pro, the difference in the amount of screen real estate you get is noticeable, and the display on that thing is much nicer. It's crispier, brighter, more spacious, and it has 120Hz ProMotion, but it also has more bulk. I think if you're a student, you have a job that requires a lot of moving, like a real estate agent, or you travel frequently like I do, then the portability of the MacBook Air is it's brilliant, especially when the M3 chip really doesn't sacrifice on performance. Sure, the M3 chip isn't, the latest or greatest, and it won't set any benchmark records, but in real life use, in real world use, it's been nothing short of impressive. Apps open fast, animations stay smooth, and even heavier tasks rarely cause it to break a sweat. And the best part, it stays whisper quiet. And that's all because it's fanless, just like the M1 and the M2 Air. So it runs completely silent, which is great for quiet environments like when I'm at a library or a quiet cafe. And both the 13 and 15-inch M3 Air use passive cooling, which basically it dissipates heat naturally by relying on materials, its design, and it's also only possible because the Apple silicon chips are super efficient and produce way less heat than the previous Intel-based chips before the M1. This is all great and dandy until I start using this MacBook for sustained 4K editing, which I do here and there, especially if I've got an overseas project and I've only brought my M3 Air, because at that point, if I'm using it for 4K editing, thermal throttling will happen to restrict performance, and it's the only way the laptop can cool down without any internal fans. It doesn't happen often, and I notice it only really occurs during long periods of editing in Final Cut Pro, or when I've got it plugged into a dock and external monitor, multitasking for example, but something to be wary of for sure if you plan to push this laptop through heavy workflows like 3D rendering. It probably is one of its weakest points, so if you're a pro user with some serious intense workflows, just be wary of that. Now for everyday use, emails, documents, simple design work, the keyboard and trackpad are an absolute joy to use, and something I've got to point out because I've just really enjoyed using the trackpad and keyboard, as silly as it sounds, because obviously you're going to be using it. It is a laptop after all. But the M3 Air's keyboard and trackpad are my favorite things to type on outside of a dedicated mechanical keyboard and MX Master 3 mouse at my desk. The scissor switch keyboard has great tactical feedback without being, overly loud and annoying at a quiet cafe, while the trackpad is sensitive and simple enough for Photoshop or video editing work. Not only are they both satisfying to use and feel great ergonomically, but really don't compromise on productivity either. For example, I managed around 120 words per minute compared to the 140 words per minute I'd usually get with my Wooten keyboards and Logitech MX keys at my desk, so relatively fast enough. Now, when it comes to video calls and remote meetings, the M3 Air's integrated speakers, microphone, and webcam still hold up pretty well to this day. Let's not forget the M3 Air actually got an upgrade to the microphone from the M2 Air with better voice isolation and wide spectrum support, and here's what it sounds like. So I'm recording this directly on the M3 Air, and the 1080p video and audio quality is not half bad. It's good enough that I feel like I can comfortably hop onto a last-minute Zoom meeting knowing that I don't need dedicated headphones or a dedicated webcam and still look decently professional. Something small that I would nitpick though is the camera gets quite smudgy from opening and closing the lid. So if you don't clean, around the notch with a cloth, your video will look like a foggy bathroom mirror. So you'll always want to wipe it down before calls. Also, if you have an iPhone, you can always use it with the MacBook in continuity mode to significantly boost quality. Being in the Mac ecosystem does have its conveniences and perks sometimes. And now that the macOS Tahoe update has been officially rolled out, the M3 MacBook Air genuinely feels like a new machine all over again when I'm using it every single day. Visually, the redesigned liquid glass interface gives everything a more refined, modern polish. Even though I don't necessarily like it on the iPhone, I do think it looks great on the Mac. Animations feel smoother, windows have a subtle depth and transparency, and the whole UI has this slightly more tactile, almost fluid responsiveness. It's subtle, but once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. There are also under the hood optimizations in macOS 26, so everyday tasks feel snappier, battery management has improved slightly, and newer features like motion cues and screened messages add helpful, intelligent touches that quietly enhance the overall experience. And what's nice is that these upgrades weren't just made for the higher end Macs, they breathe life into the Air lineup as well. And it makes it feel current and really capable. And 1 year in, the M3 MacBook Air's battery life is still one of the biggest strengths. Apple claimed all-day power, and in real-world use, that is still holding up true to this day. I'm getting 15 hours with moderate use, and the battery's capacity has only degraded by 3% down to 97% max capacity after over 100 charge cycles. That is wild, and it adds up to the as new experience, and setting your max charge cap to 90% really does seem to help preserve battery life long term. So yeah, whether you're a student, creative, or someone bouncing between cafes, meetings, or flights, it's the kind of grab and go machine you don't have to overthink, just unplug and you go. Now let's run through the M3 Air's negatives, but I'll be honest, I had to actually rack my head for real negatives in this review, especially considering this laptop can now be found at $800 US. So the first one would have to still be the limited 2 USB-C ports, both on the same side. It's still an annoying design flaw, and if you use multiple accessories or work with external drives, you'll definitely feel the pinch. Then there is the 60 Hz display. So there's no ProMotion and it really takes away from the overall daily experience. It's noticeable if you shift from a ProMotion display, and it's extremely noticeable actually and jarring moving from my LG 480 Hz display, which is like heavenly silky butter compared to 60 Hz. But is it a deal breaker? You know, should you just go for the 120 Hz ProMotion display? I don't think so. Unless you're like, you know, doing competitive gaming, then 480 to 60 Hz isn't that much of a difference day to day. It is not a deal breaker, and you can get most of your work done pleasantly on this display. Storage can also feel tight with large media projects. 1 terabyte fills up pretty fast these days, let alone the 512 gigabyte drive that I have in this configuration, but it is easy to get around this by consistently using and working off external SSDs, and that's probably the more affordable solution anyway. Then there's Apple Intelligence. Don't get me started with this, because if you were hoping that the M3 or the newer Macs would unlock cool and life-changing AI features that Apple had initially promised, yeah, let's just say it's been underwhelming so far on the Mac. And then ultimately, it's still a MacBook Air. It's not a Pro. And at the end of the day, what I mean by this is if you need serious GPU power, tons of RAM, or you want to run dual external monitors, this probably isn't your machine unless you're ready to make some serious sacrifices. So as you can probably tell, a year later, I really do think the M3 MacBook Air still holds its ground as one of the best all-rounder laptops Apple has ever made. And this is especially the case with the consistent software updates and macOS 26 upgrade. For most people, students, business users, writers, or anyone who just wants a quiet, lightweight, and reliable daily machine, there's honestly little reason to upgrade to the M4 or M5 Max unless you absolutely need the latest chip or serious computing power. It's not built for power users pushing heavy creative workloads or running multiple monitors, but for everything else, it's just more than enough. It's really thriving to this day. And so if you can manage to snag a refurbished or discounted M3 Air, it is totally worth it. Just steer clear of the base configuration because yeah, these days 8 gigabytes RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage is hardly manageable, and it's like showing up to a marathon in flip-flops. Go for the 16 512 gigabyte combo if you want something that will last and keep up over time. So drop the code word comment midnight and I'll give it a like for watching right until the end. And if you do have a MacBook, you want to check out my guide to setting up the new macOS Tahoe here to make the most out of that MacBook. And as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.